banged into a trawler with Chinese one off the Falkland Islands. It was virtually winter at the time. What happened was I was on course, that was fine, and it was cold. The wind shifted. My boat steers to a wind angle by the equipment I got on the stern that steers it, and I banged into a ship.
There is rarely a life untouched by hardship or challenge. On this podcast, we invite our guests to share their very personal stories. We harness the wisdom and resilience of our guests, which has shaped who they are today.
Carl Rogers said, "That which is most personal is in fact most universal." Together we'll be inspired to embrace the resilience in our own stories and to gain strength in the face of adversity and have a few laughs along the way.
Hi, I'm Donna.
And I'm Di. We are the Double Ds, and welcome to the Discovery Diaries.
We acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording this podcast. We pay our respects to the elders, past and present, and acknowledge their spiritual connection to family and storytelling.
Both Donna and Di were born here on these lands. We are grateful to draw on the culture of telling and sharing stories, and we hope that you will draw inspiration from the stories that are shared here.
Today's episode of the Double Ds is with Jon Sanders, a modern-day adventurer. Jon Sanders is such a living legend that in the West Australian Maritime Museum in Fremantle, there is a whole section of the museum that is dedicated to Jon's achievements as a solo sailor. And we would highly recommend you go and visit the Maritime Museum if you can. So Jon has broken many world records for his solo sailing journeys. One of the most well-known is that in 1988 he completed the longest non-stop solo voyage, a triple circumnavigation around the globe, and he was sailing on his own for 658 days at sea, unassisted, and that is almost 2 years. And he went in the Parry Endeavour, and that craft is in the Maritime Museum. When he arrived back in Fremantle after that achievement, there were an estimated 350 craft and around 130,000 people there to celebrate his homecoming. That is how much he mesmerised the nation with his achievements. He was also the first man to circumnavigate Antarctica solo in 1981 to 82, circling the continent twice on the Perry-Banu vessel. And as part of that trip, he is also the first solo sailor to remain continuously at sea twice around the globe. He rounded the southernmost capes twice, and at that time was the longest distance continuously sailed by any yacht, which was 419 days. And all in all, he has completed 11 solo circumnavigations around the world, which is quite incredible over a very extensive period, because his most recent one was in 2021, which he undertook just before COVID came out. And so that voyage, which he discusses on the podcast as well, had challenges for other reasons as the world locked down around him. And he also did that circumnavigation when he was 81 years old. So he's one of the oldest people to sail single-handedly around the world as well. So that's just a few of his many, many world records and achievements. And Jon's mindset is so extraordinary and his perseverance and tenacity so strong that meeting him had a profound impact on me, and you'll hear about that in this episode. And his mindset will inspire you too, and give you hope and perseverance as you face any of life's storms.
So our interview with Jon Sanders, telling a bit of his story, actually has happened in two parts, listeners. So what we thought was going to be our recording ended up being not one of Jon's best days, and we're going to give him that allowance, Donna, because the man is a legend, and if he was having a bit of an off day, I think that's okay.
Especially when you're 85. So yes.
Exactly. So some of the recording you'll hear is part one, and then we've also got part two, which has come together.
I think it ended up being perfect for us because we actually got to spend 2 sessions with Jon, and he is a very inspirational person and really a living legend.
And what you'll hear in this podcast is that Jon is definitely not a quitter. We know from his history that he would definitely want to finish something that he started.
And that's why he decided to come back and finish off the podcast, for which we're very grateful and hope you enjoy the podcast as much as we did recording it.
So, Jon, it's great to have you here on the Double Ds.
Wow, it's great. Thank you.
Did you start in a shearing shed? Did life start off in a shearing shed somewhere?
I started with Elder Smith & Co Limited, who were wool brokers. They used to send the boys out into the field to just get experience with various farm stations with the shearing process. Didn't want me to go because they didn't think I would cope. But I went, and in a very short time I had a rather large shearing team I own myself.
Well, that
not
proved
coping.
But were you brought up on a farm? Was farming in your blood?
No. I didn't have a lot of love for the idea of farming, but after a while, of course, I got quite used to being there.
And so how old were you at this stage when you
I started with Elder Smith & Co Limited at the age of 16. I was out in the shearing world about 20, 21.
Right.
A couple of my cousins,
or a bit earlier.
A couple of my cousins did some shearing and work with the sheep shearing, and it's extremely hard work. You become very, very fit doing that, don't you?
Well, yeah. I always say I'm a shearing contractor. I never correct myself, but I'm actually a wool classer. I did all the wool classing, did very little shearing.
Yeah, but still very, very physical work. And then you, in the summer, you went sailing, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
If you weren't brought up in the country, where did you grow up?
In University of Western Australia, Netherlands, as a kid, because my father was a university professor there.
And is that where you first got your love of sailing, through being close by at the Royal Perth Yacht Club and things like that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Very much so. Crawley Bay. Yep. Lived in the university house in those days. All the academics, most of them lived in university-owned houses.
Fantastic.
And a lot of them, my parents never had motor cars till quite late or later.
And I read that you used to go out sailing with your brother, your older brother?
Younger brother. They all think he's older.
Oh, okay.
Because he looks older, or maybe I look younger.
Yeah. So tell us about those early days of sailing with your brother and how you got more into the longer distances.
I think it was just being very near to the river. Used to worry my parents a bit, but they bought me a boat, a small racing dinghy. My brother used to race on the same dinghy, but I never raced it. I just sailed up and down the river on it.
And Jon, I just have dabbled in sailing the last couple of years, and what motivated me to get into it was partly because I knew I loved the water, but I didn't know if I'd actually be any good at sailing, and I'm not saying I am, but what motivated you? Can you kind of remember back what really motivated you to be sailing and in the first place?
I certainly did like it. I liked boats and liked the sailing and did it. And a bit like everything I did, I was sort of cautious and tended to sail a little bit by myself or with a few friends, a bit like that.
Didn't strike me as being very cautious when you have done 11 circumnavigations around the world on your own.
I'm well practiced.
Yeah.
I remember in my early days.
And very prepared as well.
Well, some say, do you get seasick? In the early days, if we were going to Albany on somebody else's boat before I had my own, if it was calm, quiet, first day out, I was fine going there. But it was very rough the first day. I'd be seasick, but I could still do everything. I wasn't badly affected. Now I don't know anything about it.
So did you overcome the seasickness by just being sick and getting on with it?
Pretty young, no. Calm first day, wasn't sick next day when it was probably quite rough. When I was seasick, it was an annoyance, but I could still do everything I was meant to do.
And when you were on those early trips, did you always have this sense of adventure and wanting to go further and challenge yourself and do more?
No, I never really planned things. And I made some very, very long voyages, the longest in the world probably. I never really planned them, and I never thought anything much had happened because of it. When I arrived, and of course there's hundreds of boats and thousands of people on the docks and things, which sort of startled me. Yeah.
Right. So you just thought you were just doing a sailing trip, but it just sort of got the attention of the whole world.
A lot of people, of course, asked me and said, well, it seems to be so long at sea, but that never bothered me. I like being ashore. I like my friends ashore. Like Ainsley, just sitting nearby now.
John's brought his own guest along today in the podcast studio. The very lovely Ainsley is here too.
I read somewhere that you wrote, or you said, I get on well with me.
Yeah, I do.
And
Don't
so
have any problems, I tell you.
Yeah. I think there'd be a hell of a lot of people that would struggle with the loneliness of being out there. So one of your trips, you were the triple navigation around the world. It was it 658 days?
Yeah.
Alone on your
1 year,
boat.
10 months.
That's pretty incredible.
Probably no one else has done that. I think in non-stop sailing, definitely no one's done it.
What's that like, John, to kind of think you are the only person who's done that? Like, what does that mean to you?
Nothing. Well, it doesn't, because if you look at my Facebook, there's very little than that at all. It's more up-to-date and modern. Been there, done that. It's something I could do, which is something I could do, and it never bothered me. I didn't get bored or anything like that.
It sounds like there must be like a huge amount of things to be doing on a daily basis when you're I suppose, especially when there's rougher weather. But
there's something to do all the time.
Yep.
Always.
Yep.
Yeah. Never completed. Yeah.
Yes. And can you tell us a bit more about your sleeping patterns on these long circumnavigations?
If I'm near a shore, like I'm going around the bottom of South Africa or something, then, and I'm on a shipping route, well, then I'll sail for 20 minutes, look out, have an alarm clock or some sort of an alarm there that would wake you up every 20 minutes. But after a while, and I was pretty young, I could do that 20 minutes at a time without having the timepiece. But everyone I've spoken to who've been similar, you need to get up, have a look around every 20 minutes. They all say they do 20 minutes too, and we all agree that it should only be 15, because it's very surprising how quick a ship can come and go, but we do 20 minutes, and in actual fact we should be ginking out at 15 minutes. A lot easier now with technology, of course, because on a computer-type screen, like a television screen, all the ships around you are plotted. In a lot of areas, like the French Caledonia and places like that, it's compulsory for their fishing boats to send out the signal that we and everyone else, all the ships and whatever else, can plot. But if you sail around Australia, actually, the fishermen aren't required to transmit. I think they all receive. They know where you are, but they don't transmit it out. And I assume the reason for that is they're telling the other guy where they're fishing. They like to keep that private. I think making it compulsory would be a pretty good idea.
I did read also that you have had a couple of encounters with trawlers in other places around the world where they've been trying to hide from what they were doing and where they were.
During those long circumnavigations, I banged into a rather large Chinese ship. They mostly sail in international waters, which is, in those days was probably about only 12 miles or so. It's now you have a private fishing area of 200 miles. Or if you're in two countries very close to each other, borders drawn through the middle. I banged into a trawler with Chinese one off the Falkland Islands. It was virtually winter at the time. What happened was I was on course, that was fine, and it was cold. The wind shifted. My boat steers to a wind angle by the equipment I got on the stern that steers it, and I banged into a ship. which is very naughty. The problem was it was cold and I wasn't keen to get out and have a gink round, and seriously cold because it's not summer at all. Way down 50 degrees, more than 50 degrees.
Yeah, that's right near the bottom of South America, isn't it? There.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened then when you did eventually go and have a look?
Before I left, I had all the wires of my boat duplicated. There were two of everything welding. Probably the most important one at the time was the forestay. Well, I had two of those. One of those I broke. Also broke another intermediate wire on the side of the boat, one of the side stays wires holding the mast up. But, of course, I had the other ones all connected, still working. And the bow rail, the normal sort of bow rail that goes around your boat, that got all mangled up a bit, and it's still mangled because it's in the West Australian Fremantle Museum, the boat on good display with a mangled up pulpit bashed into a Chinese fishing boat.
And what was the reaction of the people on the Chinese fishing boat?
I think amazing, because they didn't expect on a cold winter night, cloud everywhere, plenty of wind about for a yacht to come out of nowhere, prang them, bounce off and sail away from them. They certainly did notice it.
Yeah, wow. Your mother was an author, wasn't she? A writer?
Yeah, she wrote under the name of Lucy Walker.
Yes.
Serials, Woman and Home, English Woman's Weekly, New Idea. Altogether, she wrote 39 books, and the first 5 or 6 were books in their own right, but the rest were all serials.
Okay.
The first books she wrote were, in actual fact, true.
Okay. Did she ever write any stories about your adventures?
I could see me in some of the... I used to drive her through the bush, through the northwest and places like that, where she got a lot of her information when I wasn't doing it.
My husband works at the WA Maritime Museum, so he loves looking at your... is it the Parry Endeavour?
Parry Endeavour.
Yeah.
It was good. It was my father's idea for Endeavour because he was a great Captain Cook fan. And Kevin Parry, who was the major sponsor for the whole trip, thought, well, we better put my name on it, and that's all right. So we put his name on it.
Today's episode is brought to you by Impact Society. Impact Society is a company focused on helping everyday managers become world-changing leaders. They provide straightforward and stylish tools, training and content to elevate leadership skills and mindsets and to help leaders thrive in work and in life. Impact Society has a new product that's just coming out, which is called Random Acts of Leadership, and it's a pack of cards, like a pack of playing cards, and on each of the 52 cards is a different little act of leadership to do every day. So the hope with these cards is to inspire small daily acts of leadership with big impact. So each card has a leadership action to do and then watch the positive ripple effects with your team. And they foster a culture of trust, of openness and growth. The reason I really like these cards is they're something a little bit different. They're fun, they're easy, and they've got small, actionable things to do every day. And they make fantastic gifts for the office as well. So for listeners of the Double D's podcast, there's a 20% discount on these leadership cards. You just need to go to impactsociety.co, and when you order the leadership cards, put in a discount code which is double D's, so DOUBLEDS, and then you'll get your 20% discount. And then when you receive the cards, let us know on Instagram in a message at Double D's Discovery Diaries on Instagram. Let us know any impacts and fun stories that you have with using these cards, and we look forward to you enjoying them and letting us know how they've positively impacted you. Jon, it's very good to see you again.
Thank you.
Great to have you back, and Di and I thought you would be very determined to complete the podcasting. So thank you for returning.
It's a good experience.
Now, since I last saw you a couple of weeks ago, I have completed the Perth Marathon, which I think Di might have told you about.
Yeah.
And I did think about you a lot because toward the end, I really wanted to give up. I was running for 5 hours, over 5 hours, and I thought there's no way Jon Sanders would even contemplate giving up.
Probably easier what I was doing.
Yeah, so it really inspired me to keep going, and not even, if I had a thought of giving up, I just put it straight out of my mind. So thank you for helping me get through the marathon.
Golly, that's easy.
Because, Jon, one of the things that I think some people will want to know is were there any moments when you were sailing where you actually did want to give up or you felt like giving up?
No, not at all. But I think I sailed pretty easily. Certainly in the very, very early days in very rough weather, I used to be a bit apprehensive. But the further I went, the longer I went, and the more different voyage it became pretty normal. Wouldn't have been normal for others, but then it wouldn't have been normal for me 50 years ago as against, say, 35 years ago.
Yeah, and so what was it that, even though you're apprehensive, you just knew inside yourself that you could get through it? Was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's mainly because you've done an awful lot of it. So much so you've been there, done that.
Yes.
So that you got a bit of weather and wind and what to do with the boat to keep it on a safe angle. No experience, and thought, just this again.
And then also you must have felt very confident about your boat as well as your sailing skills.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
But it was reinforced. My mast section was heavier. My rigging wires are heavier. I had some things duplicated, and that's experience as well.
Yeah, so being ultra prepared in the beginning to be able to get through the worst situations.
Some other people would be able to repair it much better than I could en route, more capable. But I was pretty good at having it pretty solid and ready before it left. I used to notice that,
Because I went to visit the Maritime Museum recently, and I saw that angle where the Parry Endeavour, that 30-metre angle. I mean, that must have been pretty terrifying, having waves coming through
Cape
there.
Horn.
Yes, yes.
And I've never been around Cape Horn, been around it 5 times, never in summer, never in the middle of winter either.
Would that be the most difficult place that you've sailed?
It's alleged to be. Going south of South Africa and continuing to the west can be very, very rough. In fact, all of Southern Oceans can be bad.
That was another thing at the Maritime Museum that I was very interested in is your recording when they said, do you ever get terrified with storms about to arrive? And your answer was, well, I am in the Southern Ocean in the middle of winter. Of course, there's going to be storms. So it didn't seem to faze you. You were prepared and you knew it was coming.
Yep. I was used to it. Well practiced at it.
Yes.
So that's what you get.
Yeah. What about when you went on the voyage, the circumnavigation during COVID, and you were 81 years old when you did that, weren't you?
Yeah, well, I ran out of my driver's licence. Still haven't got it. Because you've got to be in Perth to get that renewed.
Right. Because one of the things that happened to you on that trip was that you actually got some broken ribs, didn't you, from just the storms and the weather, the bad weather that you encountered?
No, I think I probably did that at the Royal Cape Yacht Club.
Right.
Tripped over the gangway down.
Yeah. But it's quite amazing everything that's all the adventures, isn't it, Di?
Yeah, and Jon, I think some people might be interested to take you back to the first voyage you did around the world solo. Can you remember before you went out on that, how much sailing had you actually done at a long distance?
Our first major voyage was I sailed from Fremantle to Cape Town, South Africa, in order to do with a crew the Cape Town to Rio de Janeiro yacht race. Well, I went up all the way to Durban, South Africa, by myself to Cape Town with a crew during the race to Rio de Janeiro, then by myself to the Panama Canal.
And so that gave you a taste of
I did it by
what more
stages and practice.
Yes.
Some people, go into all of that sort of thing straight off, but I had plenty of practice well before. Did by stages.
I know you often say when you're recounting what happened that it's that preparation that you really feel is so key to your success.
Yes, it is. And I duplicate things too. I got a heavier mast section than normal on the boat.
Yep.
I had duplicate rigging. All the most essential rigging was duplicated, which is just as well because two of the wires had parted on the world's longest non-stop voyage via yacht.
That was the one when you hit the Chinese fishing boat, wasn't it? Yes, so that was a very good preparation there as well, wasn't it?
Yep, just as well I had it.
Yes.
And I wonder, did you ever encounter, you obviously had the Chinese fishing boat, but did you ever encounter at any stage pirates or any threat of that sort of thing?
No, not at all. The reason for that is that I just stay well clear. For example, when I leave Brazil, when I've gone there in a race, I stand further offshore. When I'm not on a continuous non-stop voyage, I also stand a long way further out to sea where any pirates would have to be there an awful lot of weeks and months waiting for a boat like mine to go by, so they ain't there.
They might come and want to steal your supply of Vegemite.
Well, you take the shortest route and a lot of yachts do, of course.
Yes,
well, that's a bit different. You might encounter whatever you might encounter. I don't.
So would you say that the storms were the biggest kind of obstacle that you encountered?
Probably, yes. In the early days, I've been upside down twice. Learned how not to do that. And simply tow something behind the boat so that the wave breaks over the stern of the boat and gives the boat a thoroughly good washing, like a wave on Cottesloe Beach, breaking over a boat, if you can imagine that. That didn't worry the boat at all. You just didn't want it sort of going straight down a hill, digging its nose in the sea at the bottom, because then it will tip upside down.
Were you injured when that happened?
No, I wasn't lucky. Oh, a bit bruised. No, I did more damage to the boat with my body when I fell across the boat.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would have been pretty
doors and things like that.
Pretty harsh.
And then after that, went a long way further and into a second voyage another time, and nothing like that.
How long would some of these winter storms in the Southern Ocean go for?
3-4 days. I think rounding South Africa, south of Cape Town, a couple of hundred miles south of Cape Town, that could last 2-3 days. It seems that one depression meets up with another depression and they stay there. Eventually you take a bit of a risk and instead of having your boat hove to a bit by hove to, towing a obstacle behind the boat such that it keeps the stern on safe, keeps any wave breaking, washing over the boat and not the boat being tipped stern over bow, front over back, so I will back over front as you were. No, I got used to all that. In
because
fact, it didn't bother me.
You mustn't be able to sleep at all during those.
Well, I think if
storms.
I was in my 20s, first beginning, I would be very, very worried indeed.
Yes.
And I got so used to it, I wasn't very, very worried indeed.
Yeah.
Probably annoyed with the weather because I couldn't do much. Like I'd be mainly in my bunk and strapped in at that.
It just goes to show that the more you do difficult things in life, the more equipped you are to do them, isn't it?
Oh, certainly, yep.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I was wondering about as well, John, was does it cost a lot of money to actually provision a boat for a year to go solo, for the rigging and the food and everything about the boat and provisioning?
I mostly had sponsorship.
Yep.
And my own family, which is, when I say my family, my brother. So he backed it a lot. But the major voyages, I did have a number of sponsors and a leading sponsor. One was Kevin Parry and the other one was...
Is that why it's called the Parry Endeavour?
Yep.
Yeah. And just with the going on these big trips, did you have any thoughts about, the power of Mother Nature, and did you get a different perspective on
No, I'm
Mother
pretty boring.
Nature, I suppose.
If I went to Rottnest, I think the same between Fremantle and Rottnest as I would between Rottnest and South Africa. What's the difference?
Yeah. Because you've had a very unique perspective on travelling the world, haven't you? With just you've seen like so much of the world is water, and yet most people haven't spent a lot of time out on the water like you have.
And I do read and hear of people who sail around the world through the Southern Ocean. They seem to see an awful lot of things, and I've been around more times than they have. I never seem to see, like dirt and plastics and things like that. I've certainly been in oceans where plastics are, but you'd expect to find them there. But I've been in the Southern Oceans and go day in, day out, night in, night out, and don't see anything very much at all.
When you did that trip during COVID, you did do some research for Curtin University, didn't you?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, that mostly was fine plastics on the surface, and that, of course, eventually all sinks to the very bottom. So I was doing a reading throughout the entire circumnavigation every day, about the same time of day. It's interesting, the oceans, as you cross the oceans, Indian Ocean, South Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, the water is somewhat different. So the people at the university know that each and every day that I take a sample to catch the minute plastics that might be in the ocean, is that I have actually the latitude and longitude that I put there had been there, because they know there's somewhat different salt consistency and other things in the ocean. Every bit of ocean you go in, day out.
And so what were the findings of the research?
Yes, there was a good record of that. Some of the scientists there think, well, it's probably no great harm. There's certainly one gentleman I know, he says, well, actually, there's so much volcanic disturbance under the ocean, the amount of plastic goes down there is nothing. Then there are others, of course, say that it's terrible, whatever they do. So you got one group of people saying, well, there's undersea volcanoes there, and what they do is massive.
Yeah.
In fact, if we live long enough, like another 1 billion years or something, all the ocean will be mud.
Oh, wow. And were there particular oceans where there were more microplastics than others?
Yes, near the equator in the Atlantic, and also near ports. And I was cheeky enough to do one in the Panama Canal and one also near the Prime Minister's house in Sydney Harbour.
What did you find there?
Yeah, there was a bit more than what there ought to be, but I don't think the Prime Minister was a pop.
We'll not say which Prime Minister at the time, John.
John, I saw when you did your triple circumnavigation and you got the mail drops.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that? So how did you get the mail? And it looked like there was hundreds and hundreds of letters.
It was brought out to me in Cape Town, brought out to me because I went right around the world, rounded Rottnest Island, then continued on the voyage. And at my request, no more mail was dropped to me. But the first person to sail single-hand non-stop around the world had also received mail. So paper mail was all right, but you could technically get it via your radio anyway, some sort of knowledge of whatever it is.
So how many letters did you receive each time that you got the mail?
I can't remember, but quite a lot from children, which is beautiful. And I'm sorry, but I don't have that now. At the time, and also your friends and family, and think, all this stuff that's, 5 or 6 years old, boom, out to the rubbish bin it goes, and few years later, hey, I wish the heck, I still had it.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel the same, John, with I used to do a lot of travelling in China and different places in the 90s, and the letters that I wrote to my family, some of them they've kept, and then they gave them back to me recently. And, of course, I'd forgotten half of the things that I did, but it was so valuable, even though there's not very many of them. Have you kept anything?
Absolutely. No, not quite as much as I would like to have, but I wish I had.
And do you remember what they said?
Certainly my logbooks.
Yes.
The Curtin University, where we are right now, have a set of them. The West Australian Government libraries have them. and a couple of the major yacht clubs in WA also have them.
So
my
this is a
logbooks.
copy of your logbooks.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be very valuable information. Do you remember what any particular things that the children that wrote to you, the types of things they said in the letters?
No, not so much, but I wish the heck I'd kept them. David Dix was interesting because he went around the world, and I made an inquiry about normally when someone does like that, they get an order of Australia, and the education department, I spoke to the head of sort of public relations, said, well, there was a class, or at least a school, primary school in Kalgoorlie, and 2 teachers would meet every week, and the 2 classes would meet with school children, and they followed David for the whole 8 months that he was away, and other schools did everywhere else. So we went there, and the 2 teachers and all the school children nominated him for an Australian award. Well, he got the Order of Australia medal, the same as Olympic yachtsmen and Olympic gold medalists have, but he also got 2 other medals, and that's because of the children.
Fantastic. Because I also heard him talking at the Maritime Museum, and he said he was very inspired by your earlier journeys as well.
Don't know about that.
Yeah. Well, his mum actually said, said that when he left, she felt confident because he'd been sailing with you.
There was a few things I didn't tell him, but I forgot to tell him. I wish I had, but still would have made it a bit easier for him.
What would you have told him, John?
Well, he on the type of boat he has stretches a bit, certainly strong enough. But the lee side of the boat, in other words, wind's on, say, the right-hand side of the boat, starboard side of the boat, the ring would be a bit slack on the left. Well, he felt that shouldn't be, and he used to tighten it, so he kept tightening it. And he broke a couple of wires, which wouldn't have broken it if he just left it the way it was. Well, I didn't tell him because it didn't occur to me to tell him.
Yeah.
But so many things that are, you just innately learned over the years. It must be hard to remember all the things to pass on in terms of your knowledge.
Well, I just put it down to being a bit dumb.
I just think there's so much stored memory for you, John, and all your experiences. Can you tell us a little bit about when you're doing the multiple laps around?
Yep.
What's it like when you are passing the same point again? Like when you pass Fremantle again and you know you got to keep going, what's the feeling?
Well, actually, it would be more passing South Cape Lewin 3 times to make a circle, a circle, a circle.
Yes.
And the Brits up there have some sort of record of what is proper circumnavigation. It's not quite what we all think. You don't have to go all the way to the United Kingdom and places like that because obviously when you're nearer the equator, you don't have to go as far south when you go next time and so on.
Okay.
When I went over the equator, I would go more than 100 miles further north of the equator, simply so I complete a proper circumnavigation according to whatever the people who are great in geography reckons of circumnavigation.
It sounded like you saw it as a real milestone, kind of rounding those capes and crossing the equator.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Did you do anything to celebrate, or you were
going? It's interesting on the east coast of South Africa, the east coast of Australia. Well, in my case, that's Tasmania, and the east coast of South America is always a windy, rough, wet time. In fact, you'll notice that now with all the rainstorms and things like that, they're over there on the east coast.
Yes.
Well, it doesn't matter what year it is, you go up that coast, you'll get some gales and storms of those 3 continents.
And so when you go past the capes, it's sort of marks a change in weather as well as a milestone.
Cape Lewin, of course, pretty well-known windy place, but the east coast, the south-east coast of South Africa, Australia, South America, that's windy and stormy with gales that frequently go up there. They catch Sydney Hobart race out every now and again.
Do you remember your absolute favourite? Did you have a favourite spot, or Depended on the day and the weather.
I'm often asked when I'm travelling anyway and get off on land, where's your favourite spot? And so it isn't necessarily, or I suppose I could say Tahiti and French Polynesian, places like that, but actually it can be the slums in Mauritius or somewhere like that. Depends on what was most interesting and a lot of fun at the time. But, I'm supposed to say, no, it's all the beautiful scenes and Polynesians in Tasmania.
You're not supposed to say anything on this podcast. You can say whatever you like, John. I think you've earned it, the right to say whatever you want.
That's right. Did you want to just, can you briefly just talk about this circumnavigation that you did in COVID? Because it was supposed to take 8 or 9 months and it ended up taking 15 months?
Yeah.
Did you want to just go through a little bit about what happened? And
I went through Mauritius, Cape Town, into St Helena, which is the island where Napoleon was, and COVID was sort of coming into the known. By the time I got to Dutch Caribbean, St Martin, that's spelled Marten, they closed the port to stop boats going in or out, and there was no vaccine available to me or anyone else. So for about 2-3 weeks, port was closed, and then the Panama Canal was closed to a boat of my size, not big enough. So I stayed in St Martin for 3 months before I could get to the Panama Canal, permitted through the Panama Canal, and then through the management they had some special people who were keeping themselves quarantined because there's still no vaccine for it. So I could go through the canal with, because I've got to have people on board. I've got to have compulsory people who do the line handling and that, going through the Panama Canal.
Yes.
I then went all the way through to Tahiti, non-stop from Panama. Still no vaccine about. The French allowed an aircraft to come from, I think, China into, it might have been the United States, and they had people full of the COVID on the aircraft. And, of course, they went through Tahiti, and local Tahitians blamed all the yachts. There were many, many yachts now tied up in Tahiti because they couldn't go any further. They were permitted to come from the Panama Canal, but they couldn't go any further. And the local Polynesians seemed to blame all those yachts, many, many of them, which not normally there, stopped because you couldn't proceed to Australia or anywhere else. But it wasn't. It was the aircraft that came from elsewhere. But anyhow, from there I went to Bundaberg, and still there was no vaccine. I never got any vaccine till I finally got back to Fremantle. Yeah.
How did you feel throughout that period? Because there was a lot of anxiety in the world at that time, wasn't there? Although you were probably in the safest place alone on your boat.
It was. I mean, all the time I'm on the yacht, I'm not catching it from anyone.
Yes, that's right.
And Andrew Forrest was the major sponsor. He had a boat off the East Coast and he had it standing out in the Pacific, and I strongly suspect that was because of me on the yacht, but he wasn't saying so and didn't say so. But I noticed when I went down New South Wales, that very same craft, his own private craft, what he mostly used for research, that was out there somewhere. Might be 100 miles away, but it was there. And then when I got off, eventually got off Western Australia and off Rottnest, the craft was there again, but he never said anything. No one communicated with me or from Andrew Forrest's organisation. But I think that's a bit more of a coincidence that his ship and my yacht seemed to be in the same location all the time, a lot of the time, once I got into the Pacific.
Yeah, wow.
Gosh.
This episode is brought to you by my coaching program about navigating a life quake. If you've experienced a life quake, which is a traumatic life event that you are struggling to cope with, then this 9-week coaching program is for you. This is based on a very traumatic workplace-related incident that I had in November 2021, where I was absolutely struggling to cope. Over the months that followed, I documented everything I did to recover, and I've incorporated it into a framework, which is the Stronger framework. So the program is Navigating a Life Quake, and it's amongst a supportive community, a transformational 9-week coaching program, which includes weekly virtual coaching sessions and lots of other materials. So if you're interested and you can relate to this, for listeners of the Double D's podcast, there's a 20% discount. Go to my personal website, www.donnasbalconyviews.com.au. You can find out more information about this transformational coaching program. And if you put in double D, so double DS as one word, you can get a 20% discount on the 9-week coaching program.
And Jon, what about the things that you might have seen out in the ocean in terms of nature? Like what's your experience of wildlife? Is that something you're interested in?
Yes, I am, mainly whales. I keep a record. On one trip I kept the record all the time. I also would take a sample of water, which I mentioned, and also the depth of the water I had, quite unique for a boat of my size, could go down 4 or 5 kilometres in depth, and certainly found some. There was a patch of ocean which was consistently, how they can measure it from satellites up there in the sky somewhere, was about 1 metre, always a metre, a bit higher than the rest of the oceans around there. So when I went across there was mountain under the sea, which was quite interesting at that time. Now I think they know all those sort of things anyhow from the instrumentation or whatever. But they couldn't then.
And what sort of time of what were we talking about? Was this in the 80s or the 70s, or what are we talking? 80s, yeah.
Between 80 and 90, about 86 or 87.
Yeah. And tell me a bit more about these whales. What is it about whales that you love?
Well, I used to try to keep a record, but it's a little bit difficult to actually identify them. And whales were known to collide with yachts.
I was going to ask you that, if they ever got a bit too close for comfort.
And now, when you're sailing, see heaps more of them, more and more and more of them, but they seem to realise that yachts are pretty harmless things and don't bang into them. But then way back in the 1980s and 90s, they could accidentally whack a yacht and sink it, and did do that occasionally to various different boats. And I, in my early days, have hit 2 of them. It damaged the whale on each whale on each occasion because they bled a lot, but it didn't damage my yacht.
Do you think the whales survived?
I think so. I hope so. Yeah. And I'm much more confident now because it's pretty rare to hit a whale for yachts, other craft and boats.
So you think the whales have got a better sense of it?
I think they sort of know what we are and avoid it. I do wonder if it's not the kind of electronics we now have on our boats and they detect that part. I don't know that answer, but wonder.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, and I wondered about how much has technology changed and how much have you used technology, or have you stayed quite low-tech?
When I was in my first 5 circumnavigations of yacht, or 3 and 2, 5, 6 circumnavigations actually, there was very little technology. Most of it I had to navigate using a sextant and tables and paper charts and things like that. Well, now it's quite different. It's all electronic. And because everything home here is different almost every month, and people my age have got to keep up with all the 17-year-olds. It's a bit hard. Well,
I know the feeling.
That wasn't available way then, I tell you.
Yeah. But if something goes wrong, which it can do with technology, you know what to do.
Do you prefer the old school, Jon? Do you actually prefer getting out?
I think that's more fun, yeah.
Yeah, is it more fun?
More of a challenge, and I switch on my electronic chart plotter. I have a bigger chart plotter that is a screen like a television screen, larger than most yachts do. But there's a fixed boat planted on it. There's always ships around for up to 50 miles away or on the same program. None of that was available. In fact, I used to go day after day, week after week, never see a ship or anything. Well, I now know they'd have been there, but we didn't have that sort of technology then.
No, but I wonder if it actually makes you a better sailor, because you've got to be so aware and you've got to be so self-reliant, you can't rely on the tech because it wasn't there.
No. So I've spoken to a lot of single-handed yachtsmen recently, and we all say that we sleep 20 minutes on, get up, have a look around 20 minutes on. Or nowadays, of course, you can look at your screen to see how you go. And we all agree it should be 15 minutes. We all look 20 minutes, 15 minutes. But I mean, in 20 minutes, a ship can actually from nowhere be upon you.
I heard that you said in another interview, John, that there was one occasion when it was very, very cold that you purposely made your bed very uncomfortable and very hot so that it would be easier to get up. Is that
That's
right?
correct, because I banged into a Chinese trawler off the Falkland Islands. Pretty big. It was a mini ship in itself.
Yes. So after
and that
that,
was reason for it.
So what did you have on your bed to make it easier to wake up every 15 minutes?
Besides your sleeping bags, was just wearing plenty of clothes. So much so that actually it was nice to stand on the step of your cockpit step with your hatch open, having a look round, because it wasn't cold. Before you'd get out of bed, you would actually a little bit by bed out of your bunk, a little bit chilled anyway. And as soon as you're out there, you're cold because you're 50 degrees south, which is way, way south, and the near gale conditions, strong wind, cold.
Must be hard to get out of bed every 20 minutes.
Made it all too warm, too much clothing in that. And it was quite a relief to stand in the cockpit ladder step and stick your head out there and your shoulders. Cool down a bit.
Yeah, make sure you didn't hit any other unintended vessels.
And it wasn't summer. Yeah. Oh, the other thing, of course, the other hazard I had going between the Falkland Islands and Argentina was the other side of the Falkland Islands was the Royal Navy. 2 aircraft carriers out there, lots of destroyers. They just retaken South Georgia, the island back off the Argentines, and we're in the process of invading the other side of the Falkland Islands.
Well, did you find out about that via the radio, or did you sort of just stumble across all of that?
I could hear it. I was getting the news. The BBC was the first with the news, and I could hear it all the way from Portishead in the United Kingdom. You can't get those sort of radio stations now. They don't broadcast because they all get things from satellites.
What were your thoughts when you heard that there's actually a war going on just nearby from where you were sailing?
Between the Falkland Islands and Argentina, about 50-50, about dead centre through it, and I saw nothing. I did hear everything that was going on because every bit of news, be it the BBC World Service or Voice of America or whatever, what was going on. And when I spoke to members of the Royal Navy off one of the aircraft carriers, they said, well, it's just as well you went between the Falkland Islands and Argentina, because if you'd gone the other side, we wouldn't have known what you were. So you might not have been here now.
Yeah.
Gosh. And John, you've given a lot of interviews over the years and you've maybe told some stories, but is there any stories you've never told?
Oh, probably is, but I can't think of what it is. It's true.
Because I think
I don't think I have any secrets or anything.
No secrets?
Naughty or anything.
It could be a world exclusive here on our podcast, John.
Oh. I'll come back and tell you if I can remember it, but it can't be too important. Yeah.
I'm interested as well, what's it like once you've been sailing for a really long period of time like that? What's it like to come back to land? What's that transition like for you?
I think you look forward to it. And as soon as I stepped ashore, I seem to remember I stumbled a bit. And I reckon that's because, I wasn't used to walking on the land. I reckon there were that many boats around, hundreds and thousands of people there when I came in. But the barge, I'd stepped onto a barge, then went up the wharf in Fremantle Harbour. The barge was rocking and rolling, so. And on the boat I got something to hold on to. So.
Yeah.
When you get back from these big adventures, John, after a few days, do you start thinking about what are you going to do next, or do you kind of just cherish being on land and seeing
One
people?
of the mistakes you make, and everyone thinks this is so lengthy and so marvellous and so wonderful, and I've just got back and they say, you're going to go again. So you probably naturally say, no, I've been there, done that. And about 1 or 2 years later, you think, oh, heck, well, I might as well at least have stops or something this way and that way. Then, of course, the media will zoom in on you and say, you said you wouldn't go. And the only answer to that is, well, I changed my mind.
And what about now, John? What sailing do you enjoy the most now? Is it still solo or two up or?
I need crew. I'm 85. Nevertheless, I've just sailed around Australia, and a lot of it was by myself. But most of it, I have a couple of guys who join me, young guys.
Yeah. And what do you get them? What do you get them to do?
25 to 30. Well, I let them do everything, actually.
Do you just bark orders at them now?
Well, one of them, Morgan Flower, he literally does everything. In fact, when I'm on his boat or my boat and we're doing some sort of distance, he insists that almost all night I stay below. Well, I'm not used to that. I'm used to waking up and looking around or whatever. But.
Yeah. Do you still take any boats across? Because I know you used to take big private boats across Australia to deliver them to different places.
Yeah, from the Caribbean to Australia, from Australia to Scotland on one occasion, etc.
No, to Scotland, did you say?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a short distance, Di, compared to all these around-the-world trips.
Was that to the west coast of Scotland then, was it, John? Do you remember? To the west?
Yeah, it is.
The west coast, yeah.
So that must have been fun taking all the different
stopping Ireland on the way up there.
Oh, what a good idea! Have a dram in Ireland on the way past.
Yeah.
So, John, so many people when they get a bit older, I think a lot of people have regrets about what they wish that they'd done this, they wish they'd done that. But you've done so many adventures and so many journeys. I think it's very inspiring for people to think, if you think you can do something,
think it's
just do it.
Well, I'm a bit of a loner in a way, bachelor, whereas a lot of people who'd like to sail across an ocean, sail around the world, or even do the sort of things I do. The problem is they also have probably girlfriend, boyfriend, married, children, things like that. That stuffs up all their long time sort of business.
Because being kind of used to being on your own or being a bit of a loner, that must have actually helped you a lot in a way because...
I don't mind being on my own at all.
Yes.
But I like company too.
Yes.
I mean, I seriously do like company. So.
And also it must have been, I thought it would have been quite comforting getting some of those letters when you were travelling around as well. Yeah.
And what about now, John? Do you have any other hobbies?
No, I get in trouble for getting on my boat and sailing it. So I've got to make sure I've got a crew. I've got to make sure the family and everybody else know I've got a crew. And I've got to reassure them by saying, well, I'm not going to do anything when I'm sailing so that they'll believe me. And anyway, I do realise at 84 and I'm not 100% agile, as athletic as I once was, that... If my boat goes from Albany to Fremantle, I'll be on it. I'll be a passenger, or if I'm not on it, I'll just have to catch the bus up to Perth and meet my boat when it gets to Fremantle.
But you still love, it sounds like you still love sailing and being out there.
Yeah. It's part of what I'm used to.
That's right. So, John, we so appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anything else, any last thoughts that you'd like to tell people or share with people? Or
No, I haven't, because my memory's not as good as it was about 2 weeks ago, actually.
I think
it's getting a lot better.
Definitely, we really appreciate being able to come back and your memories come back. It's been fantastic.
Thank you.
We so appreciate it, John.
Thank you. No.
And so if there's anyone that's sort of thinking about doing something that's difficult, what would you say to them?
Oh, just do it.
Just do it and you learn as you go.
Oh, yeah, there's plenty of critics. I mean, I used to not tell people I wouldn't, to begin with, tell my family what I'm going to do. I'm busy ordering charts and things and having them go into my cousin's home and things like that, so they didn't know I'm going to go to Cape Town, South Africa, of all things, to Cape Town, the Rio de Janeiro race. They would never, ever have dreamt to make the longest single-handed voyage by any person on the planet in a yacht or boat. But,
So who did you have to keep it from the most? Was it Mum or Dad or Colin? Who would have given you the most grief?
They're just not used to it. They find that too hard to
I guess
imagine.
also because
Even
no one
Colin
had done it
has an
before.
awful lot of experience sailing up and down the coast between Cape Naturalist and Fremantle for one way or another. But even though when they're talking, I don't say anything, but sailing from, for example, Bundaberg to Cape York and then on to Darwin, it's better for me to go to, what's a French island out there?
New
Bit
Caledonia?
of trouble there.
New Caledonia?
New Caledonia. And then up to Cape York, Torres Straits, then go up the outside of the Barrier Reef because such a lot of shipping traffic and still a lot of reef net there. And inside, of course, you zigzag and very narrow channels. But you can't tell people who deem themselves yachtsmen and da-da-da-da-da that going out in New Caledonia is a lot safer and better because there's much fewer boats and ships, much fewer reef going via that route right up to Cape York. Cape York, of course, narrow channels, so you've got to put up with that.
The road less travelled is often the best road. So when did your family find out that you were going to Cape Town? When you arrived or?
Oh, no, they knew before I left. Well,
only because
all
they
your
saw
charts and everything are going to a cousin's place at Leaks.
Yeah. They must have been very pleased when you made it.
Australian Customs now called Border Force. I'm on their side because I've done a few deliveries for them. They're the ones with the drugs. Or the ones who've caught with them and I bring them back. Yeah.
Oh, right.
I'll bring the boat back in case there's more of them on board or something.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Fantastic. How many of those sorts of missions have you done?
2.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, John, we loved having you. Thank you so much for coming back and sharing a bit more of your stories with us.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
It's been a real privilege meeting you, John. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We hope you've loved today's episode. We always enjoy bringing these to you. We'd love to grow the podcast, and one of the ways that we can do that is to ask you to like us, to follow us, to give us a review, but also just to share it with your friends and family. So, Donna, over the years, I'm sure John's been interviewed a lot, so I just feel immensely privileged that at 85 we've had the chance to get him in the studio here at Curtin and do a podcast with him.
Well, I think it's not many times would he have done podcasts twice. So we got him in twice, and in the meantime, in between, he helped me finish the marathon. I went and had a very, very close look at his exhibition at the Maritime Museum, and so it's all worked out, and as we suspected, we weren't going to, of course, force him to come back a second time. But as soon as it sort of wasn't able to continue, that was the first thing he said, I have to finish that podcast. So.
Absolutely. He actually genuinely seemed to enjoy having something to do today and coming in.
Absolutely, and we certainly enjoyed having him.